Okay, a couple of things. First thing, as I said at the start, a lot of people listening to this will be in the UK, and they might have some comprehension of a quarterback. Hopefully, people have a little bit more. I know the NFL's trying to push hard into Europe. But, a lot of people still won't be familiar with your role in the team. You seem quite a modest guy, but I think you'd have to accept you're the most important, or the quarterback is the linchpin of the team.
That's a good way to say it, of the offense.
Yeah, I mean, not most important. A bad description, but you're the linchpin. Everything goes through you.
I think that's a good analogy.
When you run on the field, just tell me what you're deciding, what the process is, what's on you.
So from a play-to-play standpoint, the way we operate is we would get the play from the sideline in the form of hand signals. So all the skill players, which means receivers and running backs and myself, look at the signals. We get the formation, how we're going to line up, and the play, the concept. So I tell that to the offensive line because they don't need to know the hand signals, but some people do it that way. So I tell the offensive line the play and what snap count is on. So when to snap the ball. Then we get to the line of scrimmage. I decide if that play, if that concept will work.
And that's on you individually.
Correct. If not, get into a play that I think will work. And oftentimes it's communicated before the game via film watching and working with the offensive coordinator. So oftentimes you're prepared for that. But sometimes you're unprepared and you just kind of got to wing it. So you decide whether the concept called will work. If you think it'll work, you communicate the blocking schemes in our offense via the mic call. And that kind of changes. The mic call on different concepts communicates different things. So it can change who the offensive line blocks based on who you call Mike. And if you watch NFL, they do something similar. Now, again, it might communicate different things on different concepts. But when you hear the quarterback go 52, 52, 52, oftentimes he's communicating to the offensive line for the blocking scheme. So we do the same thing.
So that's, sorry, when you say the mic.
Yep. It's usually it's called the Mike linebacker. So you assign the Mike linebacker, which the Mike linebacker is the middle linebacker for most defenses. And based on who you identify as the Mike, it tells the offensive line who they block, who they don't block, et cetera, based on the concept called. If I don't like it, then I have to change the concept and then communicate the Mike. And then once all that's happening, then you send the motion to do the shift. So from an organizational standpoint, it's quite challenging in our system for the quarterback. But I love it. Now that I'm used to it and I'm comfortable with it, I love it. Because you have all the freedom in the world on any given play to do anything that you see fit, that you've worked out with the offensive coordinator prior.
But it seems like you could take an hour over that process, but there's a play clock.
No, you have to do everything that I just said, from communicating the concept to the offensive line, deciding if it's a good concept. If it is a good concept, identify the mic. If it's not a good concept, change the concept, identify the mic, do the shifts, motions, everything like that. And that should be done in anywhere from 9 to 12 seconds. So ideally, you get the play in around 18 seconds on the play clock, 6 seconds to communicate / break the huddle. If everybody's set with about 12 to 13 seconds on the clock, I'm in good shape.
And then you got to execute
it. But I think the hardest thing for a lot of quarterbacks isn't the execution. It's everything prior, because everything prior can be very overwhelming. And I think that's where I was early in my Raiders career. And then when you feel overwhelmed and not confident with your pre-snap stuff, your execution's going to take a hit as well, because you're not confident what you're seeing or you're not confident in what you're doing. And so getting the pre-stuff down was a process, and about midway through the season I felt comfortable, and you could see it in my play. I started playing a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, obviously at a much lower level, but I know the feeling myself from broadcasting.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you start, there's someone talking in your ear and he's telling you which camera to look at.
Yeah.
And then you're trying to remember what you had to say, and then you've got to introduce the guests, and
it feels imagine.
But no, it's 1% of what you're doing, but what I mean is there's so much information coming in that you've got to process correctly.
Correct.
And then execute
it. And that's why in the draft process, when they talk about quarterbacks, oftentimes they talk about how fast they can process information. That's one of the most important things for QBs, is because you do have to process you have to process a ton of information and be able to effectively communicate information in a very short window of time.
And that's a hard thing to measure.
Yeah, I think it is, and I think that's why, and that's also a very important thing. And then there's a bunch of other important things, and that's why it's super hard to evaluate quarterbacks, and why it depends per system, because some quarterbacks do really well in some system and not in other systems, and it's there's so many variables in judging a quarterback and what type of fit they're going to do that. It's really hard to evaluate, but you often hear of how fast they can process information.
Yeah, I remember in the documentary about the 6 quarterbacks that were taken ahead of Tom Brady.
Okay.
And somebody said coaches fall in love with guys who look good in the shower because you can measure that. Like if someone's got big biceps and a six-pack,
exactly.
then you're impressed.
Exactly.
And it's just from your description, there's so much more to it than that.
Absolutely, and that's why. If you look at, it was so funny for the Super Bowl. Prior to the Super Bowl, they did the NFL 100 thing, and they had, 6 or 7 of the best quarterbacks ever standing there. And you had Joe Montana, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Dan Marino, Steve Young. The who's of quarterbacks in the NFL. And if you look at these guys, it's an unimpressive looking group.
It doesn't look like a 4x100 relay team, does it?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And then you go to the running backs, and they're at 50. The Barry Sanders still looks great, And so there is an immense amount of skill and athleticism that it takes to play quarterback at a high level. But what's in between your ears is so much more important, and what type of personality you have, and how do you take criticism, and also how you deal with adversity. How can you lead people? There's so many things that go into it. And we talked about being able to process information fast. We talked about a post-snap or pre-snap. Post-snap is even more dramatic. You have so much information in a 3 or 4 second window, oftentimes a 1 or 2 second window.
How many options would you have on a play? Say the ball is snapped to you, you drop back in the pocket for a passing play. How many options would be designed into the play, assuming everyone runs their line?
Correct. It depends on the concept. You have half-field concepts and full-field concepts. Most of the time, we have full-field concepts.
Which means, so that means both left and right field
correct.
are open.
And you can, based on the information that you process pre-snap, you can kind of identify where you're going to go with the ball. But there's also a timing element on some concepts.
Just quickly, to clarify for me, actually, you'd have a half-field concept in order to limit the difficulty for the quarterback. Would that be the reason to do it?
That would be one way. So if you're a quarterback that's just coming up, oftentimes offensive coordinators give you pre-snap rules, and then based on what you process pre-snap is what side of the field you go to for your post-snap read. But with more experienced quarterbacks and certain concepts and passing concepts that we do, there is a full field read element. And you start to the right, and if you don't you come back to the left, or you start to the field and come back to the boundary. So anywhere from 3 options to 5 to 6. Well, 6 options would be tough. 5 options, really. 6 option would be run.
Which you do quite a bit. I've been to quite a few of the games.
Yeah, every once in a while. I try not to in my older age for quarterbacking, but yeah, that's also an option, knowing when to take what you can get, because the defense isn't defending that portion of the field.
So we'll say in 3 or 4 seconds, you've got to pick which one of your 5 receivers you're going to throw it to and throw it to.
So literally, like one of my favorite passing concepts is a 5-option concept minus running. And there's also a way to teach quarterbacks where this concept kind of goes into it. And it's like a R4 concept, which is made really famous for teaching quarterbacks. And they have a 1.8 second read, a 2.2 second read, and a 2.4 second read. So in a span of 0.6 seconds, you go through 3 reads. And so oftentimes for this concept that I like a lot is I'm reading 2 people at the same time, and then based on what they do, I go to 2 other defenders. So you're processing a lot of movement in space very quickly.
Yeah, because I guess the other thing people need to remember is the target you're throwing to isn't there yet.
Correct.
So you're not judging.
Oftentimes you're looking at
subject.
defender.
Yeah.
Like a lot of things that we do, I'm reading a defense. I know where my receiver is going to be.
Yeah. So you're trying to figure out who's covered.
Should be.
Yeah.
So they're adjusting their routes to what they're seeing, but based on if they're seeing it and I'm seeing the same thing, then I know where they're going to be. And so I don't have to look at them.
Right. So you're not looking at your guys.
Until I decide who I'm throwing to, that's when I look at a receiver. But oftentimes I'm looking at the defense. And that's when you hear broadcasters say, oh, he's doing a great job reading the defense. That's what he's doing. He's looking at the defense, and the defense is telling him who to throw to. Not, hey, that receiver is open. Oh, he's open, throw it. And oftentimes when you see like really bad interceptions, like what was he thinking? It's because he didn't see the defender because he wasn't looking at the defender. He might have been looking at his receiver or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, because, I mean, watching you and watching the NFL, it's amazing how accurate the passes can be.
Have to be.
Well, have to be, yeah. But like you throw, there could be a 6-inch window you got to hit. But that's fascinating to know that you're looking at the defender because you know where your guy's going to be.
Oftentimes. And then your eyes go to the receiver, and then you decide what type of ball you need and where the ball needs to go. But if it's a 2.5 second process of deciding who to throw to, majority of that time is spent looking at the defense for our offense.
And do you keep one eye out for someone coming for you? A sack, or
you kind of can't. You just kind of that's the craziest part of a quarterback job. It's really a game of chess until you incorporate 4 to 5 very large, strong men trying to hurt you. So that's the crazy aspect of it. And you really, the amount of trust that you have to have in your offensive line is immense to be a good quarterback, because you really have to rely on them to do their job, which you can't really check, because if you're looking at the offensive line or the defensive line, you're screwed. And you can tell that when you see quarterbacks play, you can often see their body language or their head or their eyes come down to flat or even down a little bit. And you know, not so much in the NFL, but at lower levels, you know they're watching the O-line and they're screwed. You can't be successful. So you just, even if you're getting pummeled on a daily or play-by-play basis, that's where the short memory comes in. You just have to try to operate at the highest level and just know that you could get, 120-kilo guy bury you, and then you just gotta kind of, that didn't work. Do it again.